The whole middle part of this design is the main content of the page. It's a good idea to add the main element for assistive technologies so they can be aware of which part of the page contains unique content. The content itself is an article. So let's wrap everything in an article element. The area with the image is our header for the article, as it contains the title. There's a few other bits in there as well. Let's write the HTML in the order that it would be good to read it, rather than the order that we see it. We can change that later with CSS. So let's create our header. We have the title, which we can put in an H1 because it's the main title for the article. Then we have this blue business button up here. Now, let's talk about the functionality, which is what's going to depict the actual HTML element. When we click on this business, we're probably going to be taken to the categories page, which we already have a link for, and is probably going to list the business articles in that business category. So in that case, it's a link. So let's write it as a link. We'll put our little placeholder in, the href attribute. Let's add a class to this link because it's styled differently from the other links in the page. That way we can make it look like that blue pill that we see. The other things that we have in this header are this little picture of the author's name, and this date that the article was published. So for the author, let's use an image. That's also in our images folder. We can also assume that if we click on the author's name, it will take us to a page which lists all the articles by the author. So let's make that a link as well. There's another special attribute that we can use here because we know it's the author. It's the relationship attribute. We've already seen this previously in head elements. The relationship here is simply author. The date in which the article was published can be depicted with the time element. Now there's every chance that we might have to go back and change this HTML when we write our CSS, but that's fine. We can do that at the time. There's also this big image. It's debatable with these big hero images. Hero is the term that we use for big areas of eye-drawing media content, usually found at the top of web pages, as to whether it's a content image, in which case we add it to the HTML, or a background image, and then we can use CSS to show it, rather than adding it to our HTML. This is a question you have to ask yourself. Is it there for content or purely aesthetic value? Having it as an image element has benefits. Assistive technologies can read it, for example, whereas they can't if it's only shown with CSS. However, that doesn't matter so much if it has no effect on the actual content. Let's keep it as a background image here, as we can look at it with CSS in the next section, and it will be good practice for our background images. Because of that, we don't need to add it to the content of our header. Now for the article body itself. We probably want to contain it within a sectioning element to keep it aesthetically separate from the header. Let's use a div. as it holds no semantic value. Now the content is a mix between paragraphs and headings. If we look at the heading sizes, they get smaller as the article goes down. This is common with the design to denote what an H2, H3, H4, etc. might look like. So let's pop them in first. You may be wondering what this language is. If you haven't seen this before, it's Latin, a common placeholder language we use in the West when we don't have any real content to fill in gaps yet. We call it lorem ipsum, after the first two words that usually generate the placeholder Latin text. You can Google lorem ipsum and you'll find a generator, which will give you this Latin text to use inside our paragraph elements. Or if you're using VS Code, you can type lorem and press enter, and some will appear for you. Let's use that for our paragraphs. You can now use some of this generated text to fill in the headers as well. And there we have it. That's all the content for the article page. As you can see, if we break it down, it actually becomes relatively straightforward. Let's move on to the content for the landing page.